She faints during a personal medical exam, only to wake up in the arms of the handsome millionaire doctor. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Emily stepped out onto the 12th floor of the Parkside Medical Center. Everything around her gleamed: white walls, soft lighting, sleek decor that whispered money and modernity. She clutched her bag tightly, her heart ticking a little too fast, and not just because of the climb up from the subway. She had almost canceled the appointment twice that morning, but the fatigue wasn't going away. The dizzy spells were becoming more frequent, her body aching in quiet protest after every long day at the office. Something was off. And though she hated hospitals, hated the vulnerability they made her feel, she had finally given in. At the reception, she gave her name, Emily Harper, and was led to a private examination room, part of the comprehensive wellness package she had hastily signed up for online. The nurse, warm but brisk, handed her a gown and directed her to change. Everything was efficient, quiet, professional. And strangely cold. Minutes later, she sat on the edge of the exam table, dressed in the paper-thin gown, legs dangling as she tried to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. She hadn't told anyone she was here. No one in New York really knew her. That's how she liked it. Or had convinced herself she did. She had moved from Ohio just 6 months earlier, leaving behind a life she didn't talk about. A shattered engagement, the sudden loss of her mother, too much pain packed into too little time. New York was supposed to be a fresh start, but some wounds followed you no matter how far you ran. A gentle knock at the door startled her. "Emily Harper?" a calm voice asked from the other side. "Yes," she called softly. The door opened, and a man in a white coat stepped in, clipboard in hand. He looked up, and Emily blinked. He was younger than she expected. Early 30s, maybe. Tall, lean, with dark hair neatly styled, a strong jawline, and eyes the color of rain clouds. Deep gray, intense. There was a quiet authority in his posture, but his gaze was gentle as it met hers. "I'm Dr. Andrew Carter. I'll be conducting your exam today." Emily nodded, a little too quickly. "Hi," he smiled. "No need to be nervous, it's routine. I'll be checking vitals, reviewing your medical history, and we'll do a quick physical evaluation." He asked a few preliminary questions, made notes, then gestured for her to lie back so he could check her heart rate and blood pressure. "Any history of fainting spells?" he asked. "No, just tired a lot lately," she murmured. "And sometimes dizzy." As he placed the stethoscope against her chest, Emily closed her eyes. The room felt warm now, too warm. Her breath slowed. She heard his voice, distant. "Emily?" Her fingers twitched, and then darkness. "Emily, Emily, can you hear me?" The voice was closer now, urgent. Firm hands cradled her shoulders, steady and warm. "Emily, don't close your eyes, stay with me." Her lashes fluttered, the light above her spun. She felt pressure behind her eyes, a strange mix of nausea and floating. Am I dreaming?" she whispered hoarsely. "No," the voice said, softer now. "You fainted. You're going to be okay. I've got you." Her vision cleared enough to see a face hovering just above hers. Dr. Carter. The same intense gray eyes, but now filled with worry. "Are you an angel?" she mumbled, blinking. "Do angels wear lab coats?" He gave a short, relieved laugh. "Only the best ones." She became aware, then, of her body, her head resting against his arm, his hand gently supporting her back, the scent of clean cotton and something faintly citrus. She was in his arms. Literally, panic surged through her. She tried to sit up, but he steadied her. "Easy. You're okay. You had a vasovagal response, low blood sugar, probably exhaustion. Have you eaten today?" She flushed, embarrassed. "Just coffee." He shook his head, still holding her upright. "That's not a meal. I didn't think I'd pass out," she muttered. "No one ever does." His hand lingered at her shoulder for a second longer before he helped her back onto the table. He moved swiftly, expertly, checking her vitals, handing her water, placing a small cold pack at the back of her neck. She sipped slowly, cheeks burning. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "That must have been dramatic." He smiled as he sat beside her on the stool. "Not the first time someone's fainted in my office. but definitely the first time they asked if I was an angel." Emily groaned softly. "I was delirious, maybe, but it was kind of flattering." A pause stretched between them. He leaned forward slightly. "Do you live alone?" She nodded. "I just moved here. I don't really know anyone yet." He studied her face, not intrusively but with quiet concern. "You're not alone right now, okay?" Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. She looked away. "Thanks for catching me." He stood, setting the stethoscope back around his neck. And somehow she believed him. Emily sat up slowly, the paper sheet rustling beneath her as she tried to steady her breathing. Her head still felt a bit light, but the worst had passed. She clutched the cup of water in her hands, grateful for its chill and for the steady presence sitting across from her. Dr. Andrew Carter hadn't left her side. He hadn't handed her off to a nurse or excused himself for another appointment. Instead, he remained seated, legs crossed, posture relaxed but attentive, as if she were the only patient he had today. That fact alone unnerved her more than the fainting spell. "You really don't have to stay," Emily said, breaking the silence. Her voice was quiet, uncertain. "I'm not in a rush," he replied gently. "And you're not quite ready to stand yet." She nodded, cheeks still flushed with embarrassment. "Is this normal?" "Fainting? Yes, especially when you've skipped meals and are running on caffeine and stress." He tilted his head. "Living in New York tends to do that to people." His tone was light, but his eyes never lost their quiet attentiveness. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't clinical detachment either. It was something else. Genuine care, delivered with the precision of someone who noticed everything but judged nothing. "Still," she said, "I'm sure you have 100 other patients who aren't passing out in your arms." He smiled. "Today, I only care about the one who did." Her breath caught for just a second before she looked down at the cup in her hands. A soft knock came at the door. A woman in scrubs, holding a clipboard, peeked in. "Dr. Carter, you're 2 o'clock. Should I reschedule?" He glanced at the clock on the wall, then back at Emily. "I'll be there in 15, he said, and the nurse blinked in surprise before nodding and stepping away. Emily raised an eyebrow. "I didn't mean to throw off your schedule." "You're not," he said simply. "Sometimes the people who look like they need the least help actually need it the most." The words landed softly but heavily. She didn't answer, just stared at her water cup again. "You just moved here?" he asked. She nodded. "A few months ago. New job, new life, still figuring it all out." He offered a knowing smile. "Let me guess. Pushing too hard, trying not to ask for help, pretending everything's fine." She looked up, startled. "Are you always this perceptive?" He chuckled. "Hazard of the job, but also, I've been there." She tilted her head slightly. "You? Somehow I can't picture you overwhelmed by anything." "Oh, I've had my moments," he said, "more than I care to admit." Something about the way he said it, softly, without ego, piqued her curiosity. She wondered briefly what kind of life existed behind that perfectly pressed lab coat, behind the cool confidence and calm eyes. As if reading her mind, he stood and moved to the small sink in the corner, washing his hands with practiced ease. "You're stable now, but I want you to rest another 15 minutes before standing up. I'll have someone bring you juice and a protein bar. Low blood sugar is no joke." "Thank you," she said, her voice a little smaller now. "For everything." He turned to her, drying his hands with a towel. "It's my job." "No," she said, "it's more than that." Their eyes held for a moment. Then, as if the connection had grown too visible, he broke it and smiled gently. "Well, don't tell anyone. I've got a reputation for being emotionally unavailable." That made her laugh softly, surprised by how natural it felt. After he stepped out, Emily lay back against the cushioned exam table, staring at the ceiling. Her heart was still racing, but for different reasons now. Outside, the nurse who had interrupted earlier caught Dr. Carter in the hallway. "Sheshing's okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Just fainted. Exhaustion, low glucose." The nurse narrowed her eyes playfully. "You skipped 2 meetings for her," he shrugged. "She needed a doctor. You haven't sat through an entire patient consult like that in months." Dr. Carter paused, glancing back toward the exam room. "I know," he said softly. "That's what makes it different. So let me get this straight," Jess said, leaning on the kitchen counter with her arms crossed and an eyebrow raised. "You fainted, actually fainted, into the arms of a hot doctor?" Emily rolled her eyes as she stirred her tea, avoiding eye contact. "Don't make it sound like a rom-com. It was medical, clinical, very professional." Jess smirked. "He stayed with you after? Skipped his next appointment for you? And he's gorgeous? Sounds pretty unclinical to me." Emily shook her head, but her lips twitched with the threat of a smile. "It was nothing. Just a doctor doing his job." "Aha. And the way you're still blushing 2 days later is totally unrelated." "I'm not blushing. You're beet red." Emily sighed, finally leaning against the counter with her tea in both hands. "Look, I'm not looking for anything." Jess's teasing softened. "I know. I'm just saying, maybe don't shut the door before you even peek inside." Emily didn't respond. Her eyes drifted to the window, watching snow fall in soft flurries against the glass. The silence between them grew heavier until Jess broke it with gentle curiosity. "You haven't talked about him, not since Ohio." Emily closed her eyes briefly, then took a long sip of her tea. "I don't want to reopen that chapter," but in the quiet of the apartment, the memories came uninvited. 2 years ago, she had stood in a white dress, bouquet trembling in her hands, heart full of anticipation and fear. The night before, she had received an anonymous email with photos. Her fiancé smiling intimately with another woman. Dates, messages, undeniable proof. She hadn't told anyone. She'd stood there the next morning, veil in hand, makeup done, and walked away from the altar before the music ever started. That same month, her mother had died in a car accident on the way to meet her. They never got to say goodbye. After that, something inside Emily had closed. Love had turned into something unpredictable, cruel. She moved, she rebuilt, but she never let anyone close again. Not really. She blinked back into the present, Jess watching her with quiet understanding. "I'm fine," Emily said softly. "I've got my job. I've got a roof over my head, and I don't need anything else." Jess didn't argue. She just gave her a quick hug and whispered, "Just don't forget how to feel, okay?" Across the city, Andrew Carter stood alone in his office, the lights dimmed. He stared at the framed photo on the corner of his desk, his mother in her garden, laughing, a scarf tied around her head, hands dirty with soil and joy. She'd died 10 years ago, and he still remembered the moment like it had just happened. She'd gone in for a routine procedure, an outpatient surgery that turned into a nightmare due to an allergic reaction no one had checked for. A simple oversight, one missed question on a chart. He'd been a college student at the time, pre-med, drifting toward finance out of expectation more than passion. Her death changed everything. He gave up the Carter family legacy of business and chose medicine instead, not to save the world, but to change one corner of it at a time. After med school, Harvard, and years of building his name, he found himself pulled into the family empire again, now running one of the city's most elite private hospitals. But he still took patience, still needed the contact, the clarity of one-on-one healing. And yet, there was another photo buried in his drawer, one he didn't look at much anymore. A woman with red hair and emerald eyes, his ex-fiancée. She'd left not long after he'd refused to take over Carter Holdings full-time, said she couldn't wait around while he played hero in Scrubs. But Andrew had overheard her phone call by accident. Her real complaint wasn't about his time. It was that his name should have meant more in the stock market. He ended it the next day. Since then, he had focused on work, on fixing systems, not hearts, until Emily. There was something about her, not just the way she had fainted into his arms, though that moment lingered like a strange, intimate dream. It was the way she carried herself afterward, guarded but kind, hurting but hiding it well, like someone who had learned how to stand tall because the world had never let her rest. He saw it because he knew it. And for the first time in a long time, Andrew felt something stir beneath the surface, something he didn't dare name yet. Emily wasn't expecting to see him again. It had been nearly 3 weeks since the fainting incident, and though she'd replayed that morning more times than she cared to admit, his steady hands, his calm voice, the way his eyes softened when she joked about angels. She had convinced herself it was a one-time thing. Doctors didn't remember patients like her. But when she returned to Parkside Medical for her scheduled follow-up, she walked into the waiting area and there he was, Dr. Andrew Carter, leaning casually against the reception counter, clipboard in hand, dressed in navy scrubs and that same quiet composure that made her heart skip before she could reason with herself. He looked up and saw her. His face lit up just slightly. "Emily Harper," she blinked. "You remember my name?" He stepped closer, his smile warm but easy. "It's not every day someone accuses me of being an angel and faints into my arms." Emily flushed. "Right. How have you been feeling? Better? Eating like I'm supposed to? Sleeping?" "Somewhat. Still dizzy?" Only when handsome doctors walk into the room unexpectedly. Andrew raised a brow, clearly amused. "I see your sense of humor survived." Before she could spiral into embarrassment, a nurse called her name. Andrew glanced at the clipboard, then back at her. "Looks like I'm handling your follow-up," he said with a wink. Inside the exam room, the atmosphere felt different this time. Familiar, almost comfortable. Andrew asked questions, made notes, did another round of vitals, all while maintaining a gentle rhythm of small talk that somehow settled her nerves. But just as the visit wrapped up, Emily winced and put a hand to her side. "Everything okay?" he asked, instantly alert. "Probably nothing. Just a little stomach cramp. Maybe something I ate." He didn't look convinced. "How bad is it?" "Manageable. I don't want to be dramatic." "Pain isn't dramatic," he said, already rising. "Come on, let's run a few tests to be safe." "But don't you have other appointments? Meetings?" "I do," he said, holding the door open. "They'll wait." She followed him, a strange sensation blooming in her chest. She wasn't used to being prioritized. Not like this. They walked side by side through the quiet hallways, their steps unhurried. In between check-ins with nurses and technicians, they found themselves talking, really talking. Emily told him about her job, how she was still finding her footing in the city, how the subway system made her anxious but the bagels were worth it. Andrew shared a story about his first day in medical school, how he got lost and ended up in the wrong anatomy lab. They laughed, more than once, and somewhere between the blood draw and the ultrasound scan, something shifted. Andrew looked at her, not with polite interest or professional concern, but like he was really seeing her, not as a patient, not as a problem to be solved, but as a woman. She felt it in the way his gaze lingered when she smiled, in how his tone softened when she spoke about her mother, in how he didn't fill the silence with unnecessary words. When they sat together in a small consultation room, waiting for the final test results, the quiet between them wasn't awkward. It was intimate. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For making time, for treating me like I matter." Andrew looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low. "You do matter, Emily. A lot more than you think." For the first time in years, Emily felt truly seen. Not for her past, not for her broken pieces, but for the woman she still was, and the woman she could be. As they stepped out into the crisp evening air, Emily zipped up her coat and glanced sideways at Andrew. "You're clear," he said, holding the door open for her. "All tests normal, just a mild inflammation, likely stress. Nothing serious." She exhaled in relief. "Good. I was half convinced I had some rare, unnamed condition." He smiled. "If you did, I'd name it after you." Emily laughed despite herself. "Great. I've always wanted my own disease." They walked a few steps in silence before Andrew stopped beside a cafe across from the hospital. "Can I buy you a coffee?" he asked casually. "No lab coats, just coffee." Emily hesitated. The invitation was simple, unthreatening, but something in her resisted, an old voice reminding her she didn't do this anymore. "I thank you, but I should head home," she said quickly. Andrew didn't push. He just nodded with that same calm patience she was starting to associate with him. "No problem," he said. "Some other time, maybe?" She smiled awkwardly. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying his words. No pressure, just coffee. And yet, it had felt like more. Not romantic, not yet, but open, like a door she hadn't dared to approach in a long time. By morning, her phone was in her hand before she could overthink it. "Emily, about that coffee? Is the offer still good?" The response came within minutes. "Andrew, I thought you'd never ask." They met at a quiet corner cafe the next evening. No hospital lighting, no gowns, just her in a navy sweater and jeans, him in a dark coat and scarf, both carrying the light weight of nervous anticipation. What started as small talk turned into deeper conversation. Stories about childhood, family, her first job, his awkward teenage years. They found rhythm in shared silences and surprising laughter. Emily told him about her move to New York, how she needed to get away from the wreckage of everything she lost. How, for a while, she felt like a ghost walking through her own life. Andrew listened, not the way people usually did, nodding, waiting to speak, but truly listened. His eyes didn't waver, his attention didn't drift, and then it was his turn. "My mom died when I was 20, he said quietly, fingers curled around his coffee cup. It was a routine surgery, something minor, but the hospital missed a flag in her chart. She had an allergy they overlooked. Emily's heart clenched. "I was studying finance at the time," he continued, planning to go into the family business. "I dropped everything the week she died and never looked back." "Is that why you became a doctor?" she asked. He nodded. "I couldn't save her, but I thought maybe I could stop it from happening to someone else." Emily looked down at her hands. "That's noble," he shook his head. "It's grief mostly, but it shaped me." They sat in silence for a while. The cafe buzzed gently around them, insulated from the chill outside. Emily took a deep breath. "Sometimes I feel like I lost my worth when everything fell apart. My engagement, my mom. Like I'm a version of someone I used to be, but not enough of anything anymore." Andrew was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, he said, "If someone ever made you feel like you weren't enough, that's not a reflection of you. That's on them." The words cracked something inside her. Emily felt tears well up, sudden and hot. She looked away, blinking rapidly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, embarrassed. "Don't be," Andrew said. "You're allowed to feel things." She nodded, wiping her cheek. "I'm not used to this. People listening, saying the right things. I'm not always good at saying them," he admitted, "but I mean them." From that night forward, something unspoken began to take root. They started texting every evening. Short messages at first, inside jokes, updates about the day. Then deeper ones, book recommendations, memories, fears they didn't share with anyone else. Emily found herself waiting for his name to light up her phone. Andrew began checking his inbox before his morning coffee. The connection wasn't explosive. It was slow, steady, like warmth creeping into a long, cold room. And for the first time in years, Emily let herself wonder, what if healing didn't always look like forgetting? What if it looked like beginning again? It happened by accident. Emily had stopped by Parkside to drop off some paperwork for her insurance. Nothing major. She hadn't planned to see Andrew that day, and honestly, she wasn't sure if she wanted to. Things between them had grown comfortable. Maybe too comfortable. The more they texted, the more she looked forward to hearing from him. The more she started to believe in something she hadn't allowed herself to believe in for a long time. Hope. She was walking past the hallway near the administrative offices when she heard his voice. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, it just happened. "She's lovely, Andrew," a woman said. "Her father's on the board at—" "I'm sure she is," Andrew cut in, sounding tired. "But I'm not looking to get serious with anyone right now." Emily froze. The voice, the words, they punched the air right out of her lungs. She didn't stay to hear the rest. That night, she didn't reply to his usual message. "Andrew, long day, missing our late-night chats. You okay?" She stared at it for a long time, then turned off her phone. 2 more days passed. Then 3. The silence between them swelled until it filled every corner of her apartment. Jess noticed it. "You haven't mentioned your doctor in a while." Emily shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Guess he got busy." But the ache in her chest told another story. He hadn't done anything wrong, not really. He hadn't promised her anything. There had been no declarations, no labels. But still, the way he looked at her, the way he listened, the way he showed up. She had let herself believe it was more. Maybe it had only ever been kindness. Maybe she'd made the whole thing up in her head. Andrew noticed the shift instantly. She stopped replying, stopped reaching out. When she missed her scheduled follow-up, something in him knotted tight. He waited another day before calling the front desk. Did Emily Harper reschedule her appointment? No, Dr. Carter, the receptionist said. She just didn't show. He ended the call and sat in silence in his office, tapping the edge of his pen against the desk. She wouldn't ghost him. Would she? But he'd seen it before. People disappeared when they were scared, when things felt too real. Still, it didn't stop the quiet from creeping in. It wasn't just about missed messages. It was the absence of her. That weekend, it rained. Emily walked the long way home after picking up groceries, letting the cold drops sting her cheeks. She hadn't cried in a while. She hadn't let herself. But now, beneath the gray sky, her hoodie soaked through, her chest too full, she stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and broke. Her tears mingled with the rain, indistinguishable, unstoppable. The world blurred around her as she stood trembling in the storm, realizing she'd let herself hope again. And now, she was mourning something she never even had the courage to claim. The front desk receptionist looked up in mild surprise when Andrew Carter stepped into the open-plan office of the design firm where Emily worked. He was out of place, immaculately dressed in a charcoal coat, tall, collected, carrying a quiet intensity that made people step aside without understanding why. But his eyes were searching, anxious beneath the composed surface. "I'm here to see Emily Harper," he said. The receptionist blinked. "She's in a meeting right now. I'll wait." He sat down on the low leather bench near the window, clasped his hands together, and stared out at the busy street, barely seeing it. He had left 5 messages, 2 emails, 1 voicemail he regretted the second he left it. All unanswered. But he hadn't stopped thinking about her. Not once. Not through the silence. Not through the growing ache of missing someone who had never technically been his. When Emily finally walked into the lobby, her steps slowed the second she saw him. For a moment, she looked like she might turn around, but she didn't. She came closer, cautious, collected. "Andrew?" she said, her voice neutral. He stood. "Hi." They looked at each other for a long second. "I know you don't owe me anything," he began, quietly. "And I promise I won't keep you long. But I needed to say something. In person." She didn't speak. But she didn't walk away either. "That day, the conversation you overheard," he said. "I was being pressured into a blind date. Some merger family setup my aunt cooked up. I told her I wasn't looking for anything serious, because I'm not. Not with someone I don't know. Not with someone chosen for me." His voice was steady, but his eyes were pleading. "But I wasn't talking about you, Emily. You're not a placeholder. Or a passing thing." Her brows furrowed slightly. "Then why say it like that?" "Because I've spent most of my life being told who I should be with. And I didn't want to give anyone the idea that I'd let them decide that for me again." He exhaled, the weight of weeks pressing against his ribs. "I should have been clearer. I should have told you sooner. I didn't think I had to." His voice softened. "But I see now that I hurt you, and I'm sorry." Emily looked down, her arms wrapped around herself. Her face remained unreadable, but her eyes weren't as sharp as they had been. She whispered, "It wasn't just the words, Andrew. It's what I thought they confirmed." He nodded slowly. "I know. And I hate that I made you feel that way." A long silence passed. The receptionist pretended to be deeply invested in her keyboard. Andrew took a breath, then added quietly, "I don't know what this is between us, but it matters to me. You matter to me. And if there's even a small part of you that wants to keep walking forward, I'll be here." Emily didn't answer. She just gave a faint nod and turned, heading back toward the hallway without another word. Andrew left without expecting anything, but later that night, after hours of silence, his phone buzzed. "Emily, I'm ready to hear more, if you still want to tell it." They met at Central Park the next afternoon. No tablecloths, no dinner reservations, just a bench beneath the bare branches of winter trees, their breath misting in the cold. He brought coffee. She brought gloves she never wore because they reminded her of her mother. They sat in silence at first, side by side, watching a family of ducks skim the partially frozen lake. "I missed this," he said eventually. "Me too," she replied softly. They talked. About the things that had gone unsaid, about fear, about timing, about what it meant to care for someone in the quiet way, without needing to label it yet. Emily spoke of the years she spent trying to make herself smaller, so she wouldn't be left again. Andrew shared how often he second-guessed his own heart after being told it wasn't enough. And then, without ceremony, he reached for her hand. Their fingers laced together slowly, like two people learning a language neither had spoken in a long time. Andrew turned to her, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't need you to be perfect, Emily. I just need you here. Really here." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't turn away this time. She squeezed his hand and whispered, "I'm here." They didn't need promises that afternoon. They didn't need to map out the future. They just sat together, two people who had been broken and brave enough to try again. 1 year later, the clinic lobby was filled with the sound of laughter, soft conversations, and the quiet buzz of gratitude. Emily stood near the reception desk, clipboard in hand, smiling as a young mother hugged a volunteer nurse. The day had gone better than she'd hoped. Over 100 patients seen, dozens of children vaccinated, free checkups provided for seniors who hadn't seen a doctor in years, the first community health day hosted by Parkside Medical and led by Dr. Andrew Carter and her. She'd helped organize the event from start to finish, and for the first time in years, she didn't just feel useful, she felt whole. Across the room, Andrew caught her eye and offered a wink, the kind that still made her heart skip a little. He was dressed in his usual navy scrubs, sleeves rolled up, stethoscope still around his neck, and a warm tiredness in his eyes from a job well done. When the final patient left, he walked toward her, brushing imaginary dust from her shoulder. "You survived," he teased. "Barely. My legs are going on strike tomorrow." He smiled and leaned in just enough for her to hear. "I have a cure for that." "Oh?" she asked, amused. "Is it medically approved?" "Absolutely not." He gently took her hand. "Come with me." They walked in silence through the hallways of the now quiet clinic, passing rooms that were once cold and clinical but now held memories, laughter, moments of truth. He stopped in front of a familiar door. "Exam room 3. Do you remember this room?" he asked. She smiled softly. "Where I accused you of being an angel and then passed out in your arms?" Vaguely. He chuckled and opened the door. The lights were dimmed. A small bouquet of white peonies, her favorite, rested on the counter. And on the exam table, where she once lay unconscious, there was a small, black velvet box. Emily froze. Andrew turned to her, his eyes steady, voice low. "The first time I saw you lying here, I didn't know your name. I didn't know anything about you. But I remember thinking, if I ever had a chance to keep you safe, to keep you close, I wouldn't let it slip away." He reached for the box and opened it. Inside was a delicate gold ring, simple but stunning, classic, timeless, like her. "I don't need perfect," he said softly. "I just need real. I need you. Will you marry me, Emily?" Her breath caught, eyes already glistening with tears. She laughed through them, nodding. "Yes, of course, yes." They didn't kiss right away. They stood there for a moment, forehead to forehead, letting the silence say everything. The wedding was small, just family, close friends, and a handful of volunteers who had become like extended family. It was held in the garden behind the clinic, once an unused, overgrown space now blooming with flowers, benches, and ivy-covered trellises. The same garden Emily had spent weekends helping restore, planting hope one root at a time. Jess stood by her side as maid of honor. Noah, Andrew's young cousin, carried the rings. Even the receptionist, who had once pretended not to hear their hallway tension, was there, crying softly in the back row. When it came time for vows, Emily held Andrew's hands in hers and looked up into the eyes that had never once looked away from her, since that first day. "I once fainted because I was exhausted," she said, voice trembling, "and I woke up in the arms of a man who would teach my heart how to breathe again." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. They sealed the moment with a kiss, sweet, sure, and full of the promise they had both fought so hard to believe in again. And as the sun set over the city, casting golden light on the clinic walls, Emily and Andrew stood beneath the archway of white flowers, no longer doctor and patient, no longer broken strangers, just two souls who had found home in each other. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks or perfect timing. Sometimes it finds you in the quiet moments, in a faint heartbeat, in a doctor's gentle hands, in a second chance you never thought you'd get. Emily and Andrew's story reminds us, healing begins when we dare to hope again, and that even the most broken hearts can still find their way back to love. If this story touched you, warmed your heart, or brought a tear to your eye, please like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Here we tell tales that don't just entertain, they heal, they inspire, they remind you that you're not alone. Until next time, keep believing, keep feeling, and never stop choosing kindness.